Hey guys, today I want to talk about pull requests. I guess everybody of you knows how they feel when they first got their first pull request. And for me especially, I know how I felt. I got an internship for my studies for 6 months. The first week was kind of chilled. I got to know each other, see what they're using. And then after the first week, I got into the sprint planning and got some small tickets, which I get through. And after the first few days, I saw this notification popping up. You were added to a pull request as a reviewer, and I felt like, gosh, how can you do this? I don't know anything about this tech stack they're using and all that kind of stuff. In the end, I somehow managed to do this quite well, I guess, because I'm still working for them. But I want to show you some guidelines how you can get through your first pull request. And even though if you're longer into the business, maybe there are some valuable points for you as well. So the first thing is that you have to understand what this pull request is about. So you have to read the title carefully, the description carefully, maybe even go into the ticket and see what the requirements for this feature or bug fix are, and try to get an understanding of what the other developer is trying to implement. Because if you have an understanding, you can go briefly over each file and see if this file is even related to this feature or bug fix. And if not, you can just leave a comment and say, why is this inside of this pull request? So after you got an understanding of the pull request, you go through the readability of the code. So you go through typing errors, see if there are some misspellings inside of this. Then you go into the class and function names and see if they are well written and if they fit the purpose of the function or the class. The next thing is that you can go over the comments the other developer left there and see if the comments are well written, if they are just describing what's happening or maybe describing why they implement it like this. Because every piece of code that is written comes with a cost. So someone has to maintain this code. And maybe in some time it's you who have to maintain this code. A very important point is consistency. So the code has to be consistent in the whole repository. So don't look at it as a separate part of code, just look at it as a whole. So the namespacing correct. So maybe you use camel case in this pull request, but in the other repository you're using snake case or something like this. Please pay attention on these small details. And also go through print statements. Maybe someone left their print statement inside, which they use for debugging and forgot to delete and all this kind of stuff. Also go through the if statement, see if there are any unnecessary if else nested statements, and if you can return earlier and make it just more readable for the developer. So the next big part is to go over the functionality of the code. So now you can go over the implementation, see how they implemented the functionality. Does this really, is the feature the requirements are, and are there some failure points you see where the other developer didn't see? And how would you implement this feature? And think of, is your way better or differently from which the other developer tried to implement? And think of why the other developer did it like this. Also see if one function or class is really responsible for one function and not there are many nested functions inside and doing multiple stuff in one function. And also go over the tests and see if there are tests written for the functionality, which is very important, how they wrote the tests. So maybe they forgot some cases you have in mind the other developer didn't have in mind. And also if some tests got deleted or modified, so keep them in mind and look over them and see if it's necessary to change these, or maybe the other developer just tried to make it the life easier and deleted some tests which they had to modify, and leave a comment on this. And the last point I want to talk about is what can you do if you don't know the language. So the first two parts I explained are still valuable and still doable if you don't know the language, so you can understand the pull request and you can review it by readability, because these parts you understand. You don't need a deeply understanding of the language or framework. And for the functionality part, it's a bit harder, I know, but you can ask some other developers if you have specific questions. You can go over tests and still read them in most cases and see if the whole flow and function name makes sense. So you don't have to go deeply into the function, and if you want to, you can ask other developers. And please don't follow best practices blindly. Sometimes best practices are what they meant to be best practices. But in some cases, there are better ways to implement it. So always think first and afterwards think if this way is good. So I hope I could help you with these guidelines and maybe you got some valuable things out of it. If you have any questions, just leave down a comment and I see you in the next video.